Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as cEDH. I am one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
What's up, everyone?
Reed, aka Sick Robot.
How you doing?
And special guest, John Wasson.
Hello.
And in this episode, we're going to be covering MTG finance as it pertains to EDH, cEDH, and also just covering it a bit more generally.
It's the cursed topic.
Yeah, this is one that's been especially relevant lately, and we figured this would be the time to cover it. So just to give a bit of a background on our guest, so I know John from the Kingston Magic community. So he's interacted with Morgan and Matt as well. So John makes his living buying and selling Magic cards, but he's not an LGS owner. So this kind of he can speak more to the MTG finance aspect and not just like the making money from operating in LGS and running events and that kind of thing. He's been heavily focused on EDH specs in the past, so I think he's especially good as a guest for this podcast. And he's also a fairly decent Magic player. He's been on 3 PTs. He's got a winning record overall. And he's well, I'm not going to read this last point that says better than... you know what, fine. He wrote down better than Lyndon and everything, and you know I'll give it to him. But I'm going to get in my burn because he's a... You know, speaking of burn, John is a notorious burn scumbag, so you can just take from that what you will.
It says savant on the page.
Well, I'm going to say scumbag. John, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some good buys in the past for EDH, and I guess I'm supposed to talk about some specific things that I've done or buys that I've made that are relevant to the community. I bought a lot of mono green Sobalos in the past. Big on the Devoted Druid spike. That's not Commander, but whatever. Spikes are spikes. I'm trying to think of all the big hits that I've had. I just kind of go relatively deep on a lot of things, and a lot of it works out because my either intuition on it or information I get from other people that I listen to has been pretty successful, and I get to do a lot less speccing now because my collection has gotten big enough that I can just move through cards. So pretty much I think the best scenario you can have as an investor is to get to a point where you can cut ties with that strategy and play less risky. And I went spec-wise to get to a point where I didn't have to do it anymore, so I would consider that a success.
You got out.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically like trying to day trade to get enough in the bank so that you can just put it into mutual funds and sit back, right?
I've said this to people before. Imagine going to Wall Street, except instead of every person also being a shark, they're all people running around saying, "Do you have any pretty dragons?" and you're the only person that knows where the stocks are even at, and they don't care. They just want the thing that they want. It's the most abusable stock market you can find, unfortunately. Good news is you don't have to do like heinous things to make money at it. You can. I mean, there are people out there that do like grotesque things. I would say that what I did with Devoted Druid was one of those things, but that was an exception to the rule. I don't usually do full TCG buyouts or anything like that. That was just the one time.
So what did you do with Devoted Druid?
So yeah, we bought out TCG, me and another guy. We took like 1,200 copies or something off there. They were 39 cents at the time, and then they went to $12.
Ooh.
And we got the other guy that I was with had them all shipped to him, and we were at a different GP with all the stores there, some of them that we had bought the cards from, and he started opening all the packages at the GP, and we just got all these Devoted Druids out, and then we just sold them back to the vendors at the GP for like, you know, $8 trade or something
Oh
at
my
the time.
God.
And it was very funny. So if you do something like this and all the stores figure it out, they don't like it. And they put on the back of each of their packages of Devoted Druids a card that was just like a backer, but it was always like a very aggressively worded card, like, you know, die in a fire, basically. And they were all sending me different cards with that name, like, "We know what you're doing, you're a jerk." It was it was funny, but also like I never wanted to do those things in the first place that badly. But Devoted Druid was just such a layup when Vizier of Remedies got spoiled that I did it once. I don't feel bad that I did it, but I definitely got the message and decided not to do those things anymore.
Right on.
It was funny though. I did enjoy that day.
Okay, so before we get into the main topic, let's just cover some new developments. Recently, we made an appearance on the Mystic Remora stream for some two-headed giant shenanigans, and we maintained our very, very winning record against them. We're 7-0 or something, and we'll have to make another appearance sometime and give them a chance to salvage some respect,
and or just keep farming them.
Whichever
turns
another
out.
option as well. So big shout out to Mystic Remoras.
Yeah.
Check them out.
We love you guys. Super fun.
Yeah.
And lastly, I also made a guest appearance on the cEDH cast, where they did an episode on the Gitrog monster, and so I was on there as an expert guest, along with Bending Guy from the Gitrog server. So check that out. And let's just jump into the main topic. So the reason why we're really doing this episode topic is because COVID-19 and quarantine has really shown that if you keep an eye on MTG stocks at all, or if you're trying, like the website MTG stocks, which shows like price fluctuations on a daily basis. So if you're trying to keep an eye on MTG Finance, that's a good place to check and how things are going. Or if you're just trying to buy cards, you'll have noticed that things are getting expensive. So we'll delve more into the causes or what some people are suggesting the causes for the spikes might be a bit later on. But I think we're going to start by talking about or just getting John's opinion on a bunch of different things relating to MTG Finance overall first. So first off, what are your opinions on the MTG Finance community? Be that like, big names, like Rudy from Alpha Investments, or that's the biggest name, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just walking.
I guess
down
Jason
the list
Alt is a pretty big name as well. Or be it like casual speculators who go on the MTG Finance subreddit and pick up random cards or spec random BS. What are your thoughts, John?
So, I don't follow many other finance people. They tend to not have anyone that they're talking to's best interests at heart. I don't see why they would tell you their secrets. Rudy, as an opinion, specifically emphasizing opinion here, I just think that everything that I hear from him is just to try and bait people into giving their money to help his stock levels rise. I don't see reasonable things that he has flair and flash and stuff, but that sounds like a car salesman type strat to me, and I don't think that there's anything people should take from him other than entertainment. If they're listening to him, I think it's a mistake. The other finance, I'm certainly not going for finance on Reddit. Sorry, not happening. The only other thing that I've seen recently, and I don't usually watch, but I was specifically on this one because of Double Masters being talked about, was Tolarian Community College. I saw the last video he did where he talked about what should be in that and stuff, and I thought I'm not going to say misleading, because I think that he isn't saying anything he doesn't believe. I think it's just the most inaccurate assessment I've ever seen on a topic like this.
Do you want to give just a brief summary of his?
Okay, I know we're going to get into Double Masters later, so I'll leave some of it. But his mindset is he's a very excited Magic player who loves the game and wants to play the game, and he wants it to be cheap. And he thinks that the idea of getting something cheap is having an MSRP, but also having all of the good cards bunched into a master set, like a true. Some fan designed this set, master set, and somehow it would still work for limited, but that's a side issue. He wants all the good cards. He wants fetches in there. He wants to bring the price down due to high volume of good stuff, and that is the exact opposite of how anything ever works. It's just wrong. It's been proven wrong by every master set prior. Cards temporarily go down. Some cards that are mythic, they're at rare or that are uncommon or something do die. But the cards that drop in price from those sets are always offset by cards that aren't in those sets that spike to compensate, because stores aren't taking the losses. The people that are taking the losses on those are the people that invested in the wrong cards, or the people that just have decks that had the cards that got reprinted. Those people lose a ton of money. Those are not the people you want to, kill their collections. And the people that, like the stores that have all these cards that go down, they offset right away by going wide enough to have the cards that aren't reprinted. An example would be when Karn Liberated gets reprinted in Second Masters, Ugin goes up because they're both Tron cards.
Okay.
So if you have 12 Karn Liberateds as a store, you lose money. But if you have 12 Ugins as well, it's fine. It doesn't. It's an equal opportunity, net whatever. But the one guy who has Tron half built, or the person who has a Jund deck when a Thoughtseize and a Tarmogoyf and something else get reprinted, those people take much bigger losses. And the Masters cards, after the print run is done, bounce back pretty strong most of the time. But it's not a completely accurate thing. But it always just leaves the net, the end result of all cards higher, because the cards that spiked stay up and the cards that dropped bounce back. So the cards just end up higher. There is a way to fix it. It has nothing to do with master sets. Asking for bigger things to come in master sets is just a cash grab for the people selling packs. And they sell a bunch of packs, everyone gets a whole bunch of stuff that they're happy about, then the customers come to the stores looking for the singles to finish their decks, realize they're way more expensive, think the stores are doing something scummy, blame the stores. Man, stores can't just take tens of thousands of dollars in net losses on singles and just be like, oh shucks, I guess we got it wrong this time. That's not how things work. So the customers end up eating it because they pay more for the new cards to go with the cards they got in their packs. And like the stores don't lose money. I don't lose much or anything when a master set comes out as far as singles go. It's just wonky. I think I had a weekend when Masters 3 came out where the Friday everything got spoiled. I lost $9,000, and then by the end of the weekend I was up $2,000.
Damn.
But that's because I was wide enough.
Yeah, wow.
Like, that was the Abrupt Decay thing, because I have a bunch of Abrupt Decays. I lost a bunch there, but everything else started spiking, and I was, like, positive, too. So you're not hurting me. The people that are getting hurt are the people that randomly have, those types of cards that are the wrong half of the lottery when the spoilers come out. But the people that win are always wizards.
To talk about, you mentioned a bunch of cards that have recovered in price, and I immediately think back to Force of Will and Mana Drain. They were reprinted in a master set a couple years ago, and they're already back up. They've already recovered to at or where they were beforehand.
Jace is a little bit of an exception because the modern unbanning just made that card a wonky mess forever. But Force of Will is a very, very good example of that.
Yeah, I would also say you can sort of see this in, I know it's like the point that's talked to death, but you can see it in fetch lands as well, where you see fetch lands dip after reprint and then pretty much immediately start climbing again.
Have you seen cons fetches in the last few weeks?
Just through the roof.
Windsweept's almost doubled. Bloodstain's back up to 40 Canadian. These are the numbers that you want the old fetches at, not I'm obviously fine with the fetches being somewhere in the range consistently if all of them were in the... if all fetches were $30 to $60 or something, that would be fine with me, if that was just where they stood. But when the other ones are still so high, I don't want the cons ones to also be that high.
Yeah.
I don't want cons catching Zendikars. I want Zendikars and cons to meet somewhere, not quite in the middle, but in the 40 to 50 range.
Yeah, toward the lower end.
So
I'm not going to speak for every store, but I don't want my cards to be that expensive. I want my cards to be consistent. If all of my $100 cards went to 40 and all my $5 cards went to 10 to offset, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, like
I don't want to see cards that scare people out of this game.
You want your high volume movers to be like a bit more accessible, because then it's a lot less risky to take on more of them, and then like, I don't know, let's say like new players want to get into the game, they're too afraid to pick up the high movers for existing formats, right? Or for entrenched players.
And to add to that, I want them to not be so high that people are hesitant on moving them back to me.
Sure.
I want, if you see a card that's $100, like a Scalding Tarn or something, people are like, man, do I really want to get rid of this card? I'm probably never going to have it again. But if the Scalding Tarn is $40,
yeah, especially if there's no
33 for it or something, they're fine. Whatever, they'll get it back later. It costs them $7. No big deal.
Yeah. Especially true when. Sorry, I just want to tackle on one more part to this, but I think that's especially true as well. That like cards like fetches tend to not move when there's an idea or prevailing sense that a reprint is going to be far away, and that you can continue holding on to them, right?
Yeah, and we know when the other fetches are supposed to be coming back. It's supposed to be the end of the year in the next Commander sets, I believe. That was what we were led to believe, because they're not coming in Double Masters, but they are coming this year, is what they said.
Yep.
So what do you think about casual speculators who, throw they don't make a living off of speculating on Magic cards, and they more or less just throw money around and buying lottery tickets on random cards they think are going to spike? Do you think that's healthy or inconsequential or actively detrimental?
Same thing I did when I started. Go wide and have patience. Don't buy 80 copies.
Yeah, if you're going narrow, like you're pretty much just gambling. Like you're pretty much just going to the slot machines.
Just buy packs at that point.
Yeah.
You want to chase the dream, chase the dream. But if you end up with 12 copies of 20 different cards and you have 2 years to sit on it, if you've done even any studying going into this, you'll do fine. You won't necessarily crush, but your goal shouldn't be to crush. You can't go from a $50 investment to a $2,000 payoff, but you can go 50 to 150 or 50 to 300 and go 300 to 800 and 800 to 2,000. You can do those, but this is not a one-step process.
Yeah, I know. I personally find it a bit annoying when I want to go buy some random card, like for my Riel deck that I'm brewing, which is a new commander from Ikoria that has like discard synergies. And, I look on MTG stocks and I see that brand, some, Urza's Block, I think, card that, that has cycling, and each player gains control of, or you gain control of all permanents you own that, so it's just like to regain control of things that have been stolen. I know that is like, that went from $2 to $30, and it's like, well, do I really want to spend $30 on such a, kind of a niche card and for Riel? Not really, and it's just kind of annoying when that card is getting bought out by someone who just wants to make a buck. But
yeah, it's like you're building whatever random deck. Casual decks for EDH are also just like I'm building some F&M deck to go have fun, and then there's just some cards that are inaccessible because they've spiked or been spec'd on or whatever by somebody who is just basically going all in on them, and like, hey, well, I guess I just don't get to play with this card because it's just way too far above like what I'm willing to spend on a fun deck.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily like evil or wrong about it. I know like it's very easy to paint the MTG finance community and everyone as kind of super villains twirling mustaches, but it's more or less just an annoyance, and I think that kind of annoyance can get to people and kind of make them build resentment. But I think it's important to remember that everyone should keep a cool head about that sort of thing.
Also, and I mean,
there's good news on that front too.
No, go for it.
You want me or me? You. Hold on, I can't hear him.
Yeah, it's
he said go for it.
Okay. Good news on that front is stores are like 10 times bitten, 50 times shy on cards like Brand, so their buy price isn't going to spike just because the card got bought out. It's going to go up a bit to try and lure some in, but it's not going to hold that number. When somebody does a huge buyout, or like in this case, just a relevant buyout, because I don't think there was that many copies anyway, the card will come back from whoever's doing those buyouts probably pretty quickly for a much lower number than you'd think, and then the card will settle. So if the card was $2 and goes to $30, the buy price might go up to like $6 or $8 or something, and then the card will come back at $12, and all of a sudden you'll be like, maybe I can do that.
Okay. That's reassuring. Okay, so we talked about the MTG finance community a bit, and let's move into the people responsible, because I know you have a lot to say here, and this has been a big topic of discussion, especially with the announcement of Double Masters. So let's talk about
my vocal cords.
let's talk about the big elephant in the room, which is WotC. So is Wizards of the Coast going in a bad direction in terms of like money grubbing and kind of trying to milk every last drop out of their player base?
In a word, yes. In many words, yes. But Hasbro has like this. We know that this is because of Hasbro getting involved. Once Toys R Us, I think, went bankrupt, and Hasbro started being like, we need to offset, or we're going to go bankrupt as a company. We need to see some margins that can salvage, and they went with a strategy to patch some wounds, and they've liked it, and they've kept with it. I don't know if they're still trying to patch the same wounds, or if they're just like, hey, we'll just keep riding this train as long as it goes now. But the way that they have been doing things lately is, quarterlies at the sake of long term. And they've been doing that for a few years now. I think everyone basically has seen it at that point.
Yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried that it's going to cause player fatigue.
It certainly is.
One of the things
100%.
that like we're seeing so many more premium sets, and honestly just a lot of product in general. I think the secret layers have been the thing that overlaps very specifically, where there's secret layers seemingly coming out every week, every 2 weeks, something like that, and these are clearly targeted at for whether or not it be a whale, like
for lack of a better term, really.
The whale consumer. The person who's
whale is an apt.
and it's or just trying to convince or convert people to buy some of these premium sets. So
and I mean they've really.
What do you think about the premium sets?
So I'm gonna back up to because it falls under the same category. It started with expeditions to me. And people were like, this looks so cool. This is, the greatest thing ever. Anybody can win the lottery. I will tell you a true story from the Battle for Zendikar block, and this is what I think of them, and it's what I've always thought of them. Expeditions come out at such a high point because they're so rare that the value of a box can only be X, and X is lower than the cost of the box for a player to buy, because otherwise you would just buy boxes. If boxes were always profitable, you'd buy boxes. So it has to come down lower so that there's a reason to do one or the other. That's just how it works, for sure. So when expeditions hit the numbers that they hit, they eat the value of the box. So any box that doesn't have an expedition has like an outrageously low point. So I've had customers, specifically one that I can think of, who came in, he bought a box of Oath of the Gatewatch. He got 3 foil rares in his box, no expedition. One of the foil rares was a Reality Smasher. It was looking like a good box. We priced out the box. It was worth $15.
Oh my God.
He quit. He sold me the cards and he quit Magic.
Wow.
Like, that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
You have these lotteries. We had the first pre-release we did for for Battle. Like a 13-year-old kid opened an Expedition Misty Rainforest, and he got paid $200 on the spot for it, and people were like celebrating him. So there's definitely both sides to this. But the kid isn't deciding whether he's playing Magic or not based on winning the lottery, but more people will decide not to play Magic based on losing.
So
people will buy packs to try and win, so you'll sell more, but you'll lose players by losing. And when you start putting all of this emphasis on the top end stuff, your drop off is so substantial. Like, just if you think about before Kalidas spiked like a year ago or something, that set was, I think the best card in that set was still Kalidas at like $12, and Thought Not Seer at like 10, and there was what caused like the Great Distortion was still in the single digits. That was the entire set for multiple years. Like, you just couldn't do anything with these cards. Yeah. And then you go into the secret layers, fine. You want to do something flavorful and cool in that, but you're it's the way that they're doing things like secret layers with Amazon and cornering markets and stuff. They said emphatically so often that they're not ever going to deal in the secondary market. That's the thing they stay out of. Secondary market bad, we good.
Well,
great.
so
Master sets. We looked at the secondary market. We found the cards that were too expensive. We put them in here. Here, buy our product because these cards are expensive based on the secondary market.
Yeah.
Secret layers. These cards are special. Here's some fetch lands. Why would they know that the fetch lands are that big of a deal if they're not checking the secondary market? Well, clearly these cards are great. They should know this stuff. Fine, whatever. But they're just baiting people into these obnoxious aesthetics just to try and make a buck, but
so yeah, they're trying to
do it in all the wrong ways.
So they're trying to basically. So okay, just to give context, because I think a lot of the frustration of Wizards doing things like selling secret layers and stuff comes to the fact that for any of those listening who don't know, and this is a pretty huge thing that pretty huge restriction that Wizards operates under. Effectively, in any jurisdiction, Wizards can't legally acknowledge the existence of the secondary market, just because Magic is basically gambling. If they acknowledge that the cards have absolute value, and then you can't sell to kids anymore, and the game takes a large hit, right? This is just like an established fact.
Yeah.
Right. Just to set that in stone. Right. But
there's been some funny tweets from I think Mark Rosewater or something where.
So this is sort of where I'm getting to is I think a lot of the frustration comes to the fact that they're not allowed to officially recognize the existence of the secondary market, but they also do very sketchy things like skirting around and selling secret layer products, which is effectively them trying to get as close to selling singles directly as possible to make a quick buck, right? But doing it in a way where...
The Mark Rosewater tweet, basically someone said, basically asked why these things were so expensive, and he just straight up said, I can't answer that question.
Yeah.
He
can't legally. He should have said legally.
Yeah.
He can't legally say legally.
But... that being actually
but I mean that makes sense from a guy like Rosewater. His hands are, I'm going to say, mostly tied. I don't have information for sure on this, but I'm pretty confident that the top people at Wizards, they are only doing what they're told. It is definitely the avenues they're specifically choosing. Maybe they're theirs, but they were having to do something like this anyway. This is something that I do not believe would have happened if Hasbro hadn't bought Wizards.
Sure. But I'm also saying, I think a lot of the frustration, and it's warranted frustration, but a lot of the frustration with this stuff just comes from the fact that there's a lot of inconsistent communication on that point, right? About hey, what are your plans to deal with the secondary market? And the official communication is, I don't know what that is. We don't have any plans regarding that.
Do you want to save the secondary market? I can tell you exactly how you can bring cards down without doing this. It's not that hard. It's just
actually
long.
That being said, though, I sort of wanted to hop back to premium cards in sets, referring to stuff like expeditions, invocations, box toppers as well, that kind of thing. Just for a quick second, because I wanted to ask, do you think so? Obviously, the reason why Wizards is doing so much experimenting with premium cards in boxes and stuff like that, and things of really high value is, yes, for the wow factor of, oh, hey, I opened an expedition. This is so cool. That gets people in. But also for the idea, I believe, that, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea that if you have premium cards like that in a product to shore up some of the value of the product, then that means that you can effectively bring the staples in that product down to a more reasonable level for the average consumer. Do you think that them doing stuff with box toppers, expeditions, that stuff, has it been successful in that sense, or do you think that it really still needs some reworking and it's not the way to go?
So there is a hitch in that. It doesn't apply to some stores the ones that open cases and cases face to face. But think of all the middling stores. So let's say you're in a store in an area where you're definitely not opening a bunch of cases so that you average out. You're not let's go back to those staples I was talking about.
Yeah.
Kalidas, Thought Not Seer, Reality Smasher, that type of stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So those cards come out at like $3 to $6, $8, $10 at the most. Those cards are insane. Who is trading those cards in at those numbers? Stores don't get those cards for a long time unless they open tons of product, because those cards are just so much more powerful than they are valuable. You're right. They're cheap and accessible, except they're not accessible because nobody can get them. The players keep them, or they trade a bit amongst themselves, fine. Those are exactly the types of cards that you just don't see stores acquire.
Right. And it ends up damaging brick and mortar more than online, considering you do have that supply online, right?
And who does it help? The biggest stores and the people selling the product still, the two people who need it the least.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I totally agree on those points, by the way. I just wanted to bring that topic up because I think that's it's
I mean, it's fine. It brings more information to people that don't know it, but there are ways to make customers happy and stores happy without being one of those top 1%er type things.
so that's actually what
I'm somebody who was not a top 1%er. I'm not necessarily now, but I'm certainly like not complaining now. So I can see from both angles because I've dealt from both angles. And I can tell you, as somebody who has the go wides and not getting punished on this stuff, I'm still upset because I know what it was like beforehand. And just because I got through that doesn't mean that I'm like looking down on all the other stores laughing hysterically that they're still suffering. I would rather those stores that have a smaller collection can't open product. I don't want to see those people and their customer bases have to go to the big stores to get these cards and then start thinking, well, my store sucks, I'm just going to buy online, and then those stores end up getting no business.
So there's actually sort of something that touched on there that I wanted to ask as well. So do you think that there's like a happy medium here, and like what potentially would that happy medium
for which
be?
Point?
The medium between satisfying consumers and players who obviously don't want to spend that much money on their decks or want to spend as little money as possible, as well as supporting local game stores. Like, is there a way that we can do both here?
There definitely is. I'm not sure it's a one-step play.
Sure.
I can talk about the step to make cards cheaper. Once it happens, there's going to be more steps that I haven't really factored in yet. I'm not sure about, but I know how to make cards cheaper.
Yeah, sure. Just like in your opinion, because I just find it interesting to see different people's opinions on like how they might go about fixing this issue, right? Because obviously this is like a very core issue to Magic right now.
A perfect example of how they can do it properly, there's two actually from the same set, Scapeshift and Omniscience from the Core 19. What you do is you take a standard set, like all your brand new sets as you go. You take a few top cards. I'm going to say 3 because that was what I've come to over thinking about this for a while. You take 3 mythic slots and you put 3 big cards in as like purple rares or something. They're not mythics, they're at the same rate as mythics. But if you put like, let's say the next set that's coming out, I don't even know, or even a Cory or something. So there's no Godzilla cards, none of that goofy stuff. Just a regular set, but 3 of your mythic slots are for like Snapcaster Mage, some big EDH card, Atrax or something that was in Double Masters or something, and Liliana the Veil. So that set has those 3 cards in it at mythic. Now, your standard cards, so that people have access to the new stuff, can be cheaper because you have cards in the set that are consistent, that aren't at super secret rare or whatever, that are still worth money. They're going to be $30 to $50 cards still because they're coming out, but they're still big cards. So now your box price is offset by these big cards, but they're at a ratio that people can get consistently. Your standard cards are cheaper. You've dropped 3 cards, but the important thing is you've only brought a few cards back, so you're not scaring the market into overcompensating by spiking a bunch of stuff, which is what happens with the master sets. So if you've only brought a couple cards back here and they're spread out over different decks and formats and whatever, you can keep doing that going forward, and you can plummet whack-a-mole a few of the big cards, but not like have another thing pop up, which is what master sets is just a game of whack-a-mole right now.
Okay.
And if you keep your standard sets where the big cards are not the standard cards. Standard is cheap and accessible, and that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants the one format that everyone desperately wants to be cheap is standard. Yeah. So now all the cards in the set don't have to be busted, bannable, OCO, whatever cards. They can be reasonable cards that people play major tournaments with, but those cards are being opened. They're not $0 because the expeditions are $250, $300. They can still be $12, $18 for some of these top cards. So they can still get moved around a bit, but they're not scare you out of the format numbers. And you have access to some big cards. That's great. If you actually want the cards, that's great. If not, you can trade them in, get some more stuff, build your standard deck. You could just open a box, get a Lily and an Atraxa, trade them in, and with the cards you open, and finish a standard deck. You've done it that way. You did the gamble you wanted. That's great. And if you keep doing that, but in small processes, stores don't get punished so hard at once that that cards have to spike to eat it up. You can just take a small loss on a card, relax, move on. And if you keep doing that over time, cards will go down. Nothing will compensate except normal spikes because a card sees more play, whatever, that you can't stop those. That's fine. And then you just keep doing that, and the process will bring cards down, keep standard down, and you won't have the backlash. And you get to sell a lot of standard product that you might not have sold to Eternal format players if they just want to, maybe crack a Lily or something in the standard pack and you draft. Drafts are just like the best thing to do now because you can have your normal fun draft, and if you open a great card, you open a great card. And it doesn't have to be 1 in 3 boxes to do it.
So basically, I super agree with this, by the way. I think this is would be a great step forward to sort of marrying increased supply for Eternal format cards while also making standard more affordable. But yeah, so it's basically just like the idea of taking expeditions and making it more reasonable, narrowing the scope of the expeditions so you don't have to
you break them into threes.
Yeah, you don't have to bring an entire 20 expeditions for a single set and make them super rare to get each of them. You bring it more in line so it's a lot easier to open the expeditions, but there are also fewer of them, so you don't have to have chaff. You don't have to put disrupt or choke in an expedition slot, right? You can
and you never. Of all the companies and the games you don't want to copy, Yu-Gi-Oh! Secret Rares is the last thing you want to be doing.
Oh, no, I totally agree. From the perspective of somebody who played Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively for a long time, I super agree. All the random...
I almost bought into Tour Guide, by the way. At $60, I almost bought into Tour Guide when I was working at a different store. I knew I was almost 10 years removed from being involved in Yu-Gi-Oh! But I just knew. And if I had a better financial footing, then I would have done it. But just imagine all the people that have to spend hundreds of dollars on secret rares to get them reprinted in a tin 6 months later or something, and everyone else is like, "Oh, you should have waited."
And especially the huge thing.
Wizards is like, "Oh, let's do it."
The huge thing with Yu-Gi-Oh, right, is that it was. We're getting off tangent here. We'll get back in a second. The huge thing with Yu-Gi-Oh, and I would hate to see this happen with Magic as well, is that a lot of the time it was the really good core cards to decks being printed for the first time at Secret Rare or at a super high rarity, right? Which was hugely detrimental because you have all these people buying into these very expensive cards, and then you have to reprint them at some point, and it would just tank everybody holding on to them.
I just want to make the point to people listening that just because I know what Tour Guide is doesn't mean I like or support that game at all. Yu-Gi-Oh! Sucks.
Oh yeah, no, I left the game for a reason. Lyndon left the game for a reason.
Yeah.
I never played. I just bought and sold for a year, way back from LOB to Pharaoh Servant, and then I heard about Tour Guide, and that was it.
So to get us back on track, John, I know you had some things to say about double masters. We've touched on master sets, I think, pretty extensively, but I just want to talk about. I want you to hear your opinion on double masters, especially considering that WotC said that they would not be doing master sets again.
Yeah, it's basically what I said with the Tolarian community guy and how his thought process on it is detrimental. That's basically what I was going to cover with double masters anyway. It's if you overload a set so badly. And this is something I was talking to a friend of yours about yesterday. You print Mana Crypt in Mystery Booster, you print Mana Crypt in Double Masters. Here's a free tip for everyone. I think Mana Vault is going to be over $100 soon to compensate.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
You're just asking for that because those two cards are like synonymous. And if you bring Mana Crypt from, like, obviously Mana Crypt shouldn't have been like $250 or whatever. That's fine. I understand that. But if you hit it so hard, you're just asking for his buddies to join him in the 3-digit range. And yeah, if Mana Vault's not in this set, which if Mana Vault's also in this set, then I'm like, sure, you're just double, triple masters of awesome confetti, great, super awesome, best show. Like Mana Vault is going to be the next one, and then if you hit Mana Vault later, there's going to be some big other mana rock or fast mana garbage that's going to eat it up. But like, you don't play whack-a-mole when you can just like slowly push everything down all at once. But if you like to hit with a hammer, which WotC loves to hit things with hammers, you're just going to get something else. And we've seen 5 cards at this point, and I can tell you right now, it's going to cause probably 8 other spikes. And I think Mana Vault is the biggest card that's going to spike that I know of for sure right now. I have a second one as well. I think Atraxa coming back again is going to make Contagion Engine come back up.
Interesting.
Oh no!
Free spec advice.
I mean, I don't.
That being said, just
I'm not the guy. I'm not Rudy here. I'm not the guy that's going to just lead people astray here. I don't need to make every spec work for me. That's fine. These ones are like, you can come and ask me at the store. Any people who know me and have asked me questions at the store, I'll tell you straight up what I think is going to happen. And I'm right enough of the time that people trust my opinion when they ask me that stuff. I'm not going to say Contagion Engine is going to be $60 or something, but it's certainly at a very, very low point right now, and that's a safer investment.
Yeah. So Wizards has been what a lot of people call is whale chasing. So the business model of a lot of like mobile games, and you see this in things like Hearthstone as well, is that the company really targets these quote unquote whales who
basically
spend a ton of money.
The top like 5%
on
of spenders.
the product. Yeah.
And I call those people Lindens. you need some duels off me, right? Right?
Maybe not. But
yeah, I couldn't really understand because you were talking like whale speak, and I don't really understand.
Yeah, so I'm not really the whale that WotC is targeting because I mainly buy singles. I don't really buy sealed product. But
you're my whale.
Yeah, I'm the person who the LGS whale. But so WotC's printing all these cards that are targeted at whales to just get a ton of money from them. Is that going to be scaring away players, do you think, or is this kind of like a no harm no foul kind of thing? The whole meme of this product isn't for you is really popular right now. Is that an acceptable excuse? Or
if you look at what whales have been treated like in the past, an example of that would be like in poker. It was mentioned in rounders and stuff like that. Whales always believe that if it doesn't work out for them, it's usually bad luck. They don't get scared off. You can basically not scare a whale. Wizards is just going to get to a point where their only business is whales, and that might not be sustainable. But who you're pissing off right now with sets like Double Masters is everyone who already hates pack prices going up, not people who've not bought Master sets in the past. People who their target audience is going to be like, herp de derp, I don't care, give me the box. What is it, $400? Whatever, give me the box. I don't think you're going to lose those people. They're like, the reason they're doing what they're doing on repeat is because it's still successful, and it's not going to be not successful just because it's awful for everyone else. Yeah. They're not, their goal isn't to keep the 95% people who don't want to do this happy. They hope to do enough other stuff, like cool shiny cards, secret layers, commander decks, all the other stuff is to try and appease those people. This is, it's whale chasing, but it's successful. It's not going to kill that market. You just could also get the whales and everyone else on the same plan and make tons of sales if you did things, other ways. But this way is successful, and we can't stop it from being successful. You can't just go around and tell all the people to not do this. They don't listen. I tried to tell people Mystery Booster was not what you think it is. And everyone told me I was wrong and that it was going to be super profitable. And then every single person who's come back to me with Mystery Booster stuff, bragging about how much money they opened, they would try to hand me the cards and I'd hand them back. And they'd be like, what's going on? And I'm like, these cards haven't finished dropping yet. I'm not taking these at any reasonable rate. I'll wait. And they're like, very confused. And I was like, these cards, like right now, or at least when they were handing me cards, the value of the cards was higher than a box, which is not how it works. So you have to wait until they settle lower than the box. And when they settle lower than the box, everyone's taking a loss. So everyone was buying mystery boosters, and I couldn't understand why people thought that this was going to be a home run. If they want to draft it, or they want to have fun, or they're hoping to get a bunch of cards, that's the plan B excuse. That's fine. You can do things to have fun. You can do things any way you want for that. But that's never the point they come in with. They come in with, look, I knew this was a good investment. Look how much money I made. And I tell them they're wrong, and I explain why. And they're like, well, I had fun every time. I was like, well, you would have come in with that if you meant it first. You thought it was a financial strategy. I told you it wasn't. You didn't listen to me. I'm not taking your Marrow Nars and your foil Helix Pinnacles because they're like going to be 50 cents. I don't want this stuff. I'm not taking a loss on it just because you want to be right about how much money you think these cards are worth. I pick and choose my battles sometimes. Mystery Booster is a hill I'm dying on. I'm not taking a lot of those cards, nor should other stores take, especially the foils, because the foils are a weird print. But these cards did not financially make sense. Mana Crypt was a huge card that offset a bunch of money, and everything else, Expropriate and Ristic Study and a bunch of big cards that were all, like, it just didn't, the math didn't work. So it was a trap. I told people it was a trap. I told my store to be hesitant on it, and that was wrong because everyone bought it, and I looked like an idiot. But I looked like an idiot because I knew how the finances would work. I didn't know how the customers would react. I made a mistake reading customers. I looked bad for it, but like they're the ones not being able to sell their quote-unquote expensive cards right now. So
fair enough. So we've talked about some kind of just general trends with MTG Finance and WotC making a bunch of crazy sets, whale chasing, all that. Let's get into what our podcast is mostly about, and that's going to be like EDH/cEDH spikes. Because there's been a lot of this recently, especially since the quarantine. Now, I've got a couple points I want to talk about. So first is EDH a good format to spec on? Like, are EDH cards reliably going up in price? I know standard decks, modern, all these things you can kind of see, oh, this new card is printed, so clearly this card is going to go up in price. Or, Mishra's Bauble is a good example where that card has been like $40 in the past, and then it tanked down to $3 after reprinting in Iconic Masters. And then, that's probably a good card to spec on because, another card is going to get printed that eventually breaks Mishra's Bauble. We've seen it in the past with other free draw effects and free spells. So there's that kind of reliability of specking on, those 60 card formats. But what about EDH?
It depends on what you mean by spec, and not to get cryptic on you here. If you're talking about competitive investments, you're seeing a card spoiled, like I was talking about with Devoted Druid, and then buying it. That's just like a 2 weeks before it's going up or less buyout. I don't think that's a spec. A spec would be thinking something is a reasonable buy before there's a reason to specifically and waiting on it. EDH is the only format I would spec on. Doing buyouts or like small buyout, picking up a few copies of a card because you've seen a spoiler is something you can do with constructed formats, like 60 card formats. But I don't really think that's the same thing. That's just like, oh, this card goes with this card, I buy this card. You can do that, and you can do that for tons and tons of money. But that's like immediacy, and that's not like that's not the same thing to me. Is EDH a good format to spec on? EDH is the only format to spec on.
Hot take.
Yeah.
Shots fired. Pew pew.
So, well, what kind of cards in EDH specifically? Like, what kind of cards do you look for in for specs? So, just so our listeners might know, like,
that's hard.
yeah, well, what not necessarily so that they can spec themselves, but so that they know that these are the kinds of cards that could be the targets of buyout. So that if they don't have a copy yet, they can go pick up a copy or something.
Well, I mean, Contagion Engine was one, but
But what kind of
the weird thing
characteristics make the Contagion Engine a good card to look at?
well, Atraxa coming back was a pretty good characteristic. It says it right on the card. Buy this when Atraxa comes back. That's just not like how I necessarily think. I'm trying to think of what I did. So, big commander investments that I did. Battle Bond came out. Battle Bond had a very limited print run, and people were not into it. And I could tell that very quickly. People just didn't care about Battle Bond. So I looked around. I'm like, well, this is the time where cards from Battle Bond are going to be the cheapest while they're in print. Is there something I should look for here? And I read Bramble Sovereign, and I read Bramble Sovereign a second time, and then I bought 2 GPs and a Star City Games and Bramble Sovereigns. And I have 70 copies or something. Buying out a GP of a card isn't that big of a deal. There's not that many copies of any particular card, unless it's like a fetch land or something, or a duel at a GP. Those cards, some stores just don't bring that much, or nobody brings that many copies of a card because they don't want a big buyout, or they just don't have that many copies. Bramble Sovereign's not a card that people would have brought that many copies of anyway. It had flavor to me. It had token relevance. It just had, it was green. All things that look EDH to me, and I bought it, and it worked out. But half of that was gut feeling, not something I can really,
Well, Battle Bond is
behind.
probably a really good example because you can look at. I know you've shown me your stack of Battle Bond lands.
I was going to get to that next. So
Yeah.
I bought this one. I was more aggressive on. I bought probably 6 GPs out of all the duels. There was even a Chinese vendor at one. I didn't care about language on that one. I bought all the Chinese copies too. Didn't matter. I just wanted every single one of those cards out of those stores. And then one store said, "Are you coming to the GP in 3 weeks? I'll bring you more." I said yes. And then they brought me more, and I took more. And I ended up with 1,200 Battle Bond lands total.
And that's
I'm
clearly
not sure the
paid
exact
off. Those
ratios.
cards are still
yeah.
going up.
Easy slam dunk. But that was I didn't feel bad at all buying those because I was buying them from stores, looking at the stores, being like, "Why are you selling me these cards? This is you're making a mistake here, and it's." I'm not going to say you're going to get punished for it because maybe they don't go up as much if they have them and stuff. But what you're doing is gifting me definitely free money, and that's your choice. I don't think that those cards were going to stay at that price regardless of what I did. It's just good that I have them. I don't feel bad about that one. Those cards should be significantly more money because cards like Real Duels and stuff are just out of people's price ranges, and that's fine. I don't think a bunch of Commander players should be buying Real Duels, and I certainly don't think they should be accosted for not having them. If you have cards like this consistently, if your mana base is $20 cards, $15 cards, $10 cards across the board, I don't think you've done anything wrong as a Commander player. Yeah, you're not going to win cEDH tournaments or something, but in general, my Commander market is not competitive. It's just human beings, and you guys are mutants. Always remember that. But Battle Bond lands are exactly what appeals to me as an EDH spec, but it's just obvious. So I don't really know what to tell people to look for in a card. You should look for something that screams obvious to you. Green Selvala, the mono green Selvala from Conspiracy 2 was a slam dunk. I bought a bunch of that card. That one is probably partly my fault. I don't feel bad with that one because read that card. There's so much obviousness to a lot of these buys. I really don't know how to pinpoint exactly what makes me think a card is a good spec or not. It's just sometimes.
I've got some rules of
there's a
thumb
dearth.
that I look at. So
Sure.
one is, and one I'm just going to state, I don't really spec cards, but I do try and pick up cards when they're their cheapest, and I'll buy like, one copy so that I have it and I'm not spending a bunch. So trying to save money where I can. So one thing I look at is the set. Is it a popular set? So Battle Bond, not really super popular. But because it was made for multiplayer, you're getting a bunch of cards that are very good in EDH that are just not likely to get reprinted in any set, right? When are they going to ever reprint Battle Bond lands is what you need to say. Okay, is it going to be in a standard set? No. Is it going to be in a commander product? Maybe, probably not. So there's not really that many great opportunities to reprint these Battle Bond lands, and they're very strong cards and very good. Do you want to run this card in decks that you have or decks that you're brewing with? If that is yes for a bunch of different decks, then that's probably a good card to look at or pick up. Cards that scale well. So John talked about Bramble Sovereign. That has it scales really well. It's good in lots of different strategies. And again, in a low print run set, that when are they ever going to reprint that kind of card? So that's kind of what I look at. Yeah, and
Can I add a point to that?
Sure, go ahead.
If it does get reprinted, are you screwed? I think if Battle Bond lands get reprinted, you're not necessarily screwed. You might get, like, when I bought them, they were $4 to $5 US, and if they get reprinted at some point in a commander deck or something, I don't think they're going to drop to even back to that point, let alone below it.
Yeah, I think what a good rule for like the average player who maybe wants to have multiple copies of cards for their own decks is don't something like a Bramble Sovereign. How many decks as a player are you going to have Bramble Sovereign in? If it's not like all of them, then maybe don't pick up 6 copies, because that's clearly just a spec, and you can easily get punished if they do reprint it for some reason, or that.
But that's not fun.
Yeah. But Battle Bond lands, on the other hand, something that's just, as John was saying, a slam dunk. You can put those in every single one of your decks and not feel bad about it at all.
Yeah, you're definitely right about those points, for sure.
And then one other thing I do as well is I like to brew ultra budget decks. So I've done like $50 ultra budget Yisan, where I'm trying to make it as competitive as possible. And looking back at some of those cards, they've spiked. So if you're dredging through trying to make the best deck you can on the tightest budget possible, what you're going to do is you're going to identify cards that are very powerful and very cheap. So you've got a really high power to cost, a monetary cost ratio. So those are cards that are also worth looking at. So I remember Jeweled Amulet used to be a very good budget ramp card in that deck, and then it got it spiked. Gaia's Touch, really unique effect that allows you to play an additional forest land on your turn and sacrifices to make mana. I was running that in my ESN deck, and that spiked.
Wait, that spiked?
A bunch of other things like that. Yeah.
Good talk.
I got. You go first.
No, continue.
That's all I have to say on that.
I got points to add, but I'll wait here a sec since you haven't been able to talk for a while.
Yeah, I remember when you talked about Jeweled Amulet, I just remember making fun of you. But clearly I was like, what's this random card you're showing me right now?
All right. I got 2 quick things to add there just for spec advice. One, don't spec on standard. For commander, don't do it. The print run is too high. Power level does not matter. Cards are just too common to be as expensive as you think they are.
And it's so volatile, right?
Yes, there have been exactly a few exceptions, but like, you don't play to the exceptions. The amount of people that brag to me about Walking Ballista buyouts, I was like, man, if you're doing Walking Ballista buyout, you're doing something that's going to happen 1 out of every 10 times, and you're going to throw every cent of that away the next time you spec on a standard card. It just doesn't work often enough. Like, look for cards that go with those cards that are older. That's fine. The second thing is foils for specifically cards that are getting reprinted in commander decks, because commander deck reprints are never foil. So if you see a card that comes back like 6 times, obviously it can't go that high. It's getting tons of printings. But the original foils, if it's a card like Deadeye Navigator or something, but that's a bad example because it had a Masters printing, but that was coming back in Commander sets and stuff for a bit, I think. Those cards, if you want an investment point, get one or two original foils of a card that is seeing repeated printings at normal only.
So one thing I would like to just chime in with as well is if you think a card is good, actually quickly before I do that, so on the standard sets, wait until a set is out of standard before you pick up some, like, if you want to pick up a bunch of stuff for your decks. I mean, sometimes, the new shiny thing from the new set is great to go and buy, but if you want to buy maybe companions or something, or Uro. Let's say you want to buy a bunch of Uros for your decks that have Simic for EDH. Don't buy them all while Uro is still in standard and seeing play in every format. Also, give time for new sets to settle, because a lot of times cards will get banned. If you're running out into, you're like, I'm going to make 10 different Lurrus decks and I want to have Lurrus in every one of my decks. Maybe wait until a card that is so obviously broken as Lurrus gets banned in a bunch of other formats before picking it up.
The best time to buy a standard card like Uro is a month before rotation until like 3 months after rotation, when it's still in everyone's trade binders and they haven't all shipped them to stores yet. It takes a while for cards to get out of rotation of people's collections, even though it gets out of rotation as standard. And when they're in binders and accessible everywhere, that's the best time.
Can I just say, though, the idea of not buying into standard cards because they might get banned is such a from 2 years ago problem to current. Like, any time before the past 2 years, that would just be like, what, are you crazy? What? Cards getting banned in standard?
Does anyone remember when we were losing our mind when like Intangible Virtue got banned in block, and we're just like, how could you do something so stupid that you get a card banned in block? You guys are morons. This will never happen again. And now it's just like, which cards are legal in this format? What's the stat
again? It's more cards have been banned in standard in the last 2 years than have been banned in standard in the last 20 years. Put together, that's
ever. Like Ixalan and newer has a bigger ban list than prior to Ixalan for standard.
That's insane.
But I mean, that's just bad testing.
Yeah, one thing,
the company doing the wrong things.
The last thing I want to touch on regarding EDH spikes is the effect that content creators have on influencing card prices. And in the EDH community, this is really prevalent among the command zone. So I think it was a few years ago, or maybe 2 years ago or something, when Josh Lee Kwai deployed his Aetherios Shadowborn Apostles deck, and Shadowborn Apostles just skyrocketed in price. Recently, there have been things like Reap that have exploded in price from just appearance on the command zone. So cards that you recognize are good, and this is you'll often see this with the cEDH community, where the cEDH community tends to have explored like every single card and knows what cards are very powerful, but those cards may not be widely adopted by the greater EDH community because of just lack of knowledge, because some of these cards are very old, or that tech just hasn't permeated yet. But if you identify a card as good and it's just unknown, that card is liable to spike as soon as a content creator features it on a prominent prominent YouTube
to different
channel.
degrees depending on current supply, right, as well.
Oh, certainly.
Obviously, if you find
every conversation we're having can go through different.
But obviously, there's exceptions here. If it's like you found some new way to break like a standard legal card in a new way, like, oh, there's like this bulk common from this standard set that nobody's using, but I found a way to like make it really good with whatever commander. That's
I found the first way to break Thassa's Oracle.
So even if you do it,
I know you guys didn't think this card was any good.
Even if you do it like a month down the line, don't expect a large spike. Like the prices of cards in standard tend to be like they're like pretty locked into whatever the price of the box is, and there has to be like adjustments made. So, but especially if you find definitely if you find a new use for an old card, be wary that like somebody might just happen to be like, oh yeah, I feel like buying these cards out. This seems fine.
Yeah, this was more in regards to EDH, and I think Reap was a really good example where where he was featured on the command zone and that card shot up in value when that card has been a budget staple for a long time. Once again, that was in my budget ESN deck. That card is that deck has been a gold mine of cards I should have spec'd on.
Oh well, you reap what you sow.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Cut that from the show. We can't let that stand.
The only ad I can make, because I don't know the command zone stuff that well, I don't follow any of that stuff, but I have seen some saffron olive spikes, and people should not listen to saffron olive. That guy, he wants the reserve list abolished. Let's everyone just hate that guy, please. He's a bad person.
But I mean, it's a good. If you see something on a Saffron Olive video and you're like, "Oh, that's an interesting deck," I'm using that card in my EDH deck for whatever, or I'm gonna in one of my brews. Maybe pick that up before it shoots up in price from people speculating on content creators, because that definitely does happen, and then also just the natural demand that drives. If
you have a need to get yelled at, come to my store and tell me that you're building a Saffron Olive deck. That's Kingston Gaming Nexus, by the way.
Yeah.
Because nobody mentioned that yet.
Oh yeah, we should have mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. But if you come there and ask me for a Saffron Olive deck, you will get a pretty strong yelling. I don't like him because of the reserve list thing, but also he gets credit for a modern deck I designed. And I'm upset about that. So I'm always bitter to him.
Okay, so
I was playing so
long. One trend that's been going on recently is that a bunch of EDH staples, not just cEDH or things, just EDH staples have been going up quite significantly, and this could be because EDH is now the most popular way that Magic is played, growing player base, growing interest, and people just have an increased demand for cards. Or one thing that I've kind of noticed is that people have been kind of tending towards a higher power level of deck construction in like the lower power levels, mid power, casual, whatnot. Things are power creeping up in terms of like arms races between groups. So cards that used to be a lot cheaper because they were more niche are now getting adopted by a lot more people. So this has had an effect where the price for a solid, people say 75%, 7 out of 10, mid power, those kinds of decks are getting more and more expensive, to almost to the point where they're at the price of like your average modern deck. And I want to get your take on this, John, whether or not you think it's a good thing that that EDH to have like a playable deck is the barrier to entry is getting higher in terms of monetary cost.
So obviously, theoretically, it's not a good thing. If you just look at it like more expensive means harder to get the player base bigger, and you want the player base bigger. But if it's cheaper and you get the player base bigger, then it becomes kind of a one-upsmanship type thing, and that's just how cards get more expensive. So you're in a catch-22 anyway. So the only other positive I can say from this is that it really makes people realize how detrimental the way things are going can be for this game if people let it get that way. And there's, it's hard to stop, but it's not a good thing, but there are points that can be good out of it. I don't want it to be that type of thing. I would love for a lot of these cards that are topping out near $100, Tainted Pact and Crater Hoof and all that stuff. I would be happy if they came down, even if I had the most copies of them. That would be fine with me. I don't want this. I would love it for people's competitive one-upsmanship would be to swap a $30 card with a different $30 card. But that's just not the way it goes. Because once you find the better $30 card, it becomes a $40 card. That's just how things work. So it's not. It's just an unavoidable problem that the bigger the base gets, the more expensive the decks are going to get, because you need to break through at the top if you're going to be the guy that wins those things. You want to beat all the people at X, so you need to go up a level. And if the level becomes Y, then you need to go up a level again, and you just got to keep going and going and going, and that's just how things become more expensive. So you're just stuck. It's not like a good or a bad thing. You're just stuck.
If I was to play devil's advocate about the increasing price of EDH decks, is that really you're still getting a very good bang for your buck in terms of EDH. The money you put in is gonna last. Unlike we're seeing in Modern right now with Companions and Oko and every new set. I mean, even Theros with Uro. Every new set seems to be shaking up Modern, Legacy, and all these Eternal formats, which already have a very high price point per deck. So EDH, like the good 75% deck, is still below that right now. But those decks people are joking that Modern is now a rotating format. Same with Legacy, where every new standard set is just busting it wide open and making your potential deck unplayable. And one of the appeals to Modern and these Eternal formats was that, I can buy such and such deck, and then it's going to be playable forever or almost forever. I just buy some new cards to update the list and bring it up to par. But one time it's KCI, and then it's Eldrazi, and then it's Tron, and then it's Titan, and then things get banned, and it's you're constantly having to change your deck up to keep up with the format, and it's getting very expensive. So EDH, even if it gets to be more expensive on par with Modern decks, you're still able to play these decks for a long time, and there is no real there is no real meta for EDH, or at least for casual players, that you need to continually keep up with.
That happened first mainly with Modern Horizons. That screwed everything up in that format, and everything's been a cascade of failure since then.
Yeah.
But the addition there, which is important, is cards are going up and people aren't happy about it, but your resale value also goes up. And when you look at the numbers on these decks and you see, $1,500, $2,000 or something, and that disheartens you, I mean, that's not a net loss you're taking by buying these cards. You're not locked into never getting your money back. You're going to lose a percentage, but you're always going to lose some percentage. Maybe if these cards keep climbing, you gain money. Like, you don't have to just be looking at this as I'm throwing this money away. The problem with that, which is bringing full circle here, is you start doing those investments and the wrong cards get reprinted in a double masters, and you're the guy that I was talking about who bought the wrong cards at the wrong time and got unlucky when the stores didn't get punished.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the causes of the spikes. So not just we'll talk about the recent spikes, and I'll discuss what people have been theorizing in terms of why there's a massive influx of spikes recently. But then also we can talk about why cards spike in general. So relating to COVID and the quarantine, one interesting theory I've heard is that because GPs are canceled, these have been a great way for stores to, and I mean, most LGSs are closed. Most stores have been accumulating lots of like collection buying and people selling singles and whatnot at GPs. So that's the main source for them to restock their supply. So when people are getting the stimulus checks, and they're wanting to, spend some money if they don't have any like pressing bills to pay, they want to spend some money on their hobby, they're buying all these cards that they've been putting off, and then they're draining these stores of their supply, and thus when the stores can't restock, just driving these prices up very high.
This is 100% accurate, and this is why my collection is going up, because I don't have an online presence. But yeah, every card that people is bringing me that's older, I'm trying to price check, and you only use, I only check face-to-face when they have it in stock, because they don't update, they're out of stock. And you can't check face right now because they don't have any cards in stock. Every relevant staple is gone. Everything. And I've never seen this from face before. They're probably just drowning in money, but they don't have any cards. And yeah, it's bad, but there's no way to dodge it. This is like, problem 9,600,000,000,000 of the quarantine. It's just a thing that happened because of the things that happened because of the things that happened because of the bad thing.
So do you think this is a temporary, do you think, so
yes,
if people have their cards and they're like, oh, this price is very high, maybe I should hold on in case it goes higher. That's probably not a wise idea. And also in terms of buying cards right now,
this is going to go so long that price memory is going to be a factor. I don't think they're going to get punished on cards dropping when everything comes back. I just think that the climb is going to stop.
Yeah. So when
don't be
GPs
too
open
afraid that
back
your
up,
cards are going to die.
do you think that that might be, if people are wanting to hold out for buying some of these staples that have climbed up in price significantly, do you think just holding out until GPs open back up would be sufficient to see some of these prices fall back down?
So if you wait till GPs come out, then all of a sudden you're competing with the stores again. So I don't think you want to wait until the GPs come back. I think you want to wait until just before the GPs come back.
Okay.
If I had a card that I think is only super inflated right now because of the quarantine, and I was worried that it was actually going to plummet, a month before GPs come back would be the time I would be liquidating.
Now,
I was more talking about buying cards. So like if I'm looking to buy a staple that has shot up in price, should I wait until the GPs open back up?
I really don't think there's going to be that much that falls. There'll be a bit, but it won't be as much falling as it will be just competing. So no, I think the longer you wait, the more it's going to be up. But the problem is, if you're the one that's buying the cards or listening to me here, a bunch of people do, it's going to go up because you guys bought it. So it might just be, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Now, that being said,
I'm not sure.
With the whole waiting for GPs to come back up, we did get an announcement from Channel Fireball saying that Channel Fireball events is going to be dissolved, pretty soon, meaning that they will not be running the circuits or anything like that. And I'm pretty sure they're breaking the monopoly agreement with Wizards of the Coast. So, that could also pretty heavily affect what card prices look like going forward if there are fewer GPs or potentially even no GPs for a long time moving forward, if there's not another events company or events entity that picks up the slack there.
True.
I did not know that. I had not checked on things in a long time, and I did not get that info.
So we have some other points here, John, that you might want to comment on in terms of what causes card prices to spike. So we've already discussed buyouts, and I'm pretty sure that's kind of the most obvious thing, reprints and whatnot. But you have some interesting points here that people might not be considering.
I made
this is one you wanted to talk about, and that's the rarity of the printed set symbol on in Commander decks. Do you want to just elaborate on that?
It's kind of just an illusion some of the time. So they have a philosophy on printing cards with a rarity. If it's in all of the Commander decks, they put it at common. Or if it's in a bunch of them, if it's not. But Soul Ring is in all of them, and they still have that at uncommon. And if it's in one deck, they put it at rare or mythic sometimes. And basically none of that makes sense. I understand commons and uncommons are in, all 5 Commander decks sometimes. And people should note that means that there's 5 times as many copies. But if these cards are not in a package set, they don't have a real rarity. But what it does do is it gives people a reason to consider the card at a value comparable to cards that are in sets that have the same or similar rarity at the same power level, etc. So a card recently, like Fierce Guardians, that's the blue one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that card is selling for 55 Canadian right now. If they had put an uncommon symbol on that card, it would be less. And it does not matter at all that it would be only in one deck if it had an uncommon symbol. They're just there for posterity, and they're just there to affect people's mentality when they're buying and selling these cards. It doesn't mean anything. Thought Vessel was a card I spec'd on a long time ago. Right when it came out, it was a $1 to $2 card, and I bought 100 of them or something for $1 to $2. And the easiest part of that card was people thought it was a common. It's not a common. It doesn't exist. You can't open it in your 11 cards out of a 15 card pack. It's not a common. It was in more Commander decks than one. Sure, it's not a common. that card is like as powerful as cards at Rare and Mythic, and as useful as cards at Rare and Mythic for Commander players. They're going to buy it. It's going to sell out. It's going to go up. Do not factor in the rarity of a Commander-only card like it's a real boy. It's not.
Yeah, that's definitely something I wasn't thinking about before, but I'm definitely going to consider now. Also, here you have how easy it is to cause a fake buyout
or perceived buyout.
Comment on that,
I would say.
Yeah,
is also.
That was something that I was talking about earlier with GP buyouts as well. They're not real buyouts. I'm not doing a buyout of a GP to try and screw the market or skew the market. I'm doing it because it's the easiest access I have to a card before people realize that, like stores realize that this card is of more value than they're giving it credit for. I'm not trying to be the person that causes the market climb. I'm very happy if I buy a card and it sits at the price it was for months. That's not the point of this. But you can cause a fake buyout because so many of the main stores on a site like TCG are at a Grand Prix. And if you buy out just one room at one time, even if the buyout is 30 copies, not a significant number for a market of just about anything. And I'm not talking reserved list stuff here. I'm talking, a card I did years and years ago. Didn't really pan out, but it's a good example here. Orzhov Pontiff. I bought a bunch of Orzhov Pontiffs at one point. And I just, you didn't take that many copies to eliminate a lot of the top stores on TCG from having any. And if you can do that without really causing much damage, it can still end up causing some damage by the stores overreacting to it. And stores are more than happy to try and think they're smarter than the other stores. And if they see somebody that they trust who knows what they're doing, which a lot of stores know me, they see me do something, they probably get on board with it, and they will try to fight each other. And if they fight each other, sometimes they'll cause the spike themselves, even though the buyout isn't real. So that's what it means with a fake buyout.
Interesting. So we've got 2 points left, and our final point is going to be on cEDH specifically. But before we get to that, talking about MTG Finance without getting into the RL a bit would be a bit of a
sacrilege.
Crime. So the one thing I've noticed with the RL recently, and it's kind of been an assumed golden rule with RL cards that they'll always go up forever. But recently there was a crash, and now with the quarantine, things are starting to pick back up. But what do you think of that bit of wisdom that there's never a bad time to buy RL cards, that the prices will only keep getting more expensive, or what do you think about crashing in RL, or just kind of like the ebb and flow of RL prices overall?
There is never a bad time to buy reserve list cards. I don't care about the crashes, any of that stuff. Especially for people that I'm talking to and not necessarily myself. You're not going to have enough reserve list cards unless you're like a lunatic, myself included here. Because I do have a lot of reserve list cards, but you're not going to have enough where a crash is going to affect you. You shouldn't be selling these cards at any reasonable rate anyway. They're the kind of cards that you make individual decisions on. If you think a card is high enough that you want to get rid of it, even if it goes up later, that's fine. I think buying reserve list cards and sitting on them is kind of a deep breath that you get to take, where you're safe. You should feel comfortable with reserve list cards. You should not believe Saffron Olive, etc.
we can speak to some personal. We can give some personal anecdotes on this. Matt, Morgan, and myself, we were all getting into cEDH at around the same time and buying a lot of the staples at around the same time. And it is just paid off in spades.
Yeah.
Thank
you, John, CEDH. For the $70 Mox Diamond that you sold me.
Yeah, the
let's pour one out for our boy.
the price of cEDH, if you're trying to get into the format now, is absolutely just insane.
It's basically
a lot of these things were less than half of what they are now for these staple cards. I got like my Mana Crypt for $100, and I know that was a big purchase at the time, and now it's just double or triple that. So
That's not reserve list, doesn't count.
It's not reserve list, doesn't count, sure. But yeah, Mox Diamond, Mana Crypt. Sorry, not Mana Crypt. Grim Monolith.
Do you want to hear my Grim Monolith story?
Sure. Yeah. So let's hear it.
Grim Monolith is my most profitable card of all time. Period. Slam dunk. Not close.
Really?
I went to every face open that I was around for. Man, when did I start going to tournaments like that? Before 2010 anyway. And every time I had enough money to buy anything, I would buy Grim Monoliths from those stores. If I went to a GP, I bought Grim Monoliths. They were $25 Canadian.
Yep.
I ended up with 87 of them. And at a GP Pittsburgh, right after they really, really spiked, they had hit about 130 US. I went to Star City Games and I said, how many Grim Monoliths would you take? And the three vendors looked at me like I was, some idiot who had 4 and thought he was cool. And they said, we'll take as many as you got. And I dropped, I think I dropped like 72 of them on the table, and they had just all looked, and one guy was like, I guess. I kept a few of them, but I ended up selling 60 plus Grim Monoliths to Star City all at once for trade credit. So 7,000 US cash. No,
that's insane.
It was really funny to see the look on 3 Star City vendors' faces who have seen everything, and they're just like, all right, this guy's flexing on us right now. What do we do? It was good.
Yeah, so yeah. I don't know. It definitely feels like, looking back, every time I bought RL cards, I regret. Like, I just still don't have all the duels. I'm still missing some staples like Wheel of Fortune and whatnot, and I'm still thinking like
everyone missed the boat on Wheel of Fortune. Don't feel bad about that one. Like, nobody, when that card hit like $100, everyone was like, "Well, this card's done for a while. We're just going to stay away from that. This card's already like a poisonous stain on the community. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist." The card also like doesn't exist. Like, nobody. Even people looking for Wheel of Fortunes, unless you were like literally buying out everywhere on the internet, you never found a bunch of Wheel of Fortunes. I saw less Wheel of Fortunes than probably definitely every dual land, but I'm trying to think of something else. Like Mox Diamonds and Lion's Eye Diamonds and stuff, I saw way more of those than I saw Wheel of Fortunes ever. It's just a card that just never happened.
Yeah.
It spiked because it wasn't there, but it was never there to be found anyway. It was not like... It never felt like a missed opportunity to me. It felt
to my point, which was that, every time I look back, I kind of regret not buying some of these RL cards sooner. But I would feel weird giving the advice now that like, there's never a bad time to buy RL now, even though that kind of does seem to be the trend. It's just, it's such a feels bad to get into cEDH now, and that's why, the cEDH community is very, very pro proxy and, pro,
as I said, though,
playing online.
You can get your money back, and especially on RL. Like, you can, it sucks. I understand it sucks, and I understand it feels bad, but I think it's the safest thing you can do with your money. It's just like, it's buying stocks. It's just buying stocks, and it's the best stock to buy. It's, Google. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Fair enough. If you need to sell them, you're probably going to be able to find a buyer.
My last big purchase was 4 cards in Toronto, all power, for $7,000, and it's the best buy I've ever made. Second best buy I've ever made, and I don't feel any worry about it. And obviously, I'm not saying people should just like throw down $7,000 because whatever. I'm saying whatever your comfortable ratio is to that. It's just, it feels safe. It was profitable at the time, but also it just feels safe. I don't feel like I've risked $7,000 when if you buy a bunch of other cards, even the ones that we're recommending, there's still risk, and I don't feel like there's the risk here. It just might be stuck forever, and being stuck forever sucks too. But man, you can spend $7,000 and get $6,600 back instantly if things change, and you can't always do that with other cards, so it doesn't feel like that to me.
The last point here is on cEDH staples and cEDH spikes. So this is stuff that more we can speculate on than John, I think, because I know John isn't necessarily familiar with you're not really familiar with the cEDH meta and what kinds of cards and decks are going on. I know these cards.
I know that they have gone up, and if you ask me why, I would be like, because people drooled over them and they looked pretty. I don't know.
Yeah. it really,
yeah,
yeah.
I can sit out for a bit if you want me to.
Well, you can chime in whenever you have something you think is relevant to say. But so we've got a list of cEDH staples and cards that have gone up recently and have been have spiked. So we'll just read this list first, and then Reed, Matt, and myself can kind of talk about what we think this means. And why this is going on. So we've got Demonic Consultation, Sacred Guide, Steel Enchantment, Chrome Mox, Winds of Change, Tainted Pact, Extract, Baron. God, what's his full title? Read.
Master Wizard.
Master Wizard. Yeah, okay. Baron, Master Wizard, Hermit Druid, Plunge into Darkness, and Curse Totem.
So
and some of these have spiked very, very hard. So I think the kind of big ones here are to talk about are Winds of Change, which went from something like $3 to now it's like $40. Tainted Pact, which was $5 or $10 not 2.5 years ago. Now $90, $80, something like that. Base regular copies are $80.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's
Yeah,
check
Tainted
that.
Pact like 2 or 3 weeks ago went triple.
Yeah, Curse Totem used to be a $5 Canadian card, so like $3, $3.50 US. Now it's like a $40 card. Yeah, there have been some very, very strong spikes from these cards, and we can kind of speculate as to why. So
like I would like to say, just out the gate here, my personal opinion on a lot of these quote unquote spikes or jumps in price are sort of just due to Thassa's Oracle, honestly. I think
Yep.
Hermit
yeah,
Druid.
I think in part it might be because there's interest in them for cEDH purposes, sure, but I think a majority of the time it's just because people look at Thassa's Oracle and they're like, oh, okay, what else is good with Thassa's Oracle? I don't care if it's legal in any formats, but just like what's good with Thassa's Oracle in general.
Well, yeah, a card that can remove your
great,
whole library.
awesome. Let's
fine.
buy a bunch of those cards. So I think a lot of that is why we see stuff like Consultation, Tainted Pact, Hermit Druid, Sacred Guide, all of those go up. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff about Hermit Druid spiking before Thassa's Oracle was spoiled.
I mean,
but
we could also talk about before this, before the last ban announcement, Flash and Protean Hulk were climbing up there. Yeah, and that is very much a cEDH thing because as we've discussed before, Flash did not see much, if at all, play in casual casual.
So I
so
I definitely think those were. I think that was sort of because of cEDH. I think it was this combination of it being really prevalent and really good in cEDH, but also it was getting a lot of attention, right? Like a lot of attention from a lot of different content creators, which makes sense in the way that like it would be pushing up the price. I think specifically in this
all
case,
the Top Commander podcasts talking about cEDH.
I think specifically with the stuff that we have in this case, it's a lot of stuff with Oracle being printed and being very obviously good, and then having a lot of these old cards that somehow see play in some random formats where people just want to own, maybe for Cube, maybe for whatever else. And just, again, like the recurring theme of low supply, suddenly increased demand equals spikes. And then also when you...
See, I disagree. I think there's actually been quite a fair amount of targeted buyouts in cEDH because a lot of these price increases are not... We would not get the impression that this is just from a all of a sudden spike in natural demand. Like Curse Totem, for example.
So I agree with the other stuff here.
This card going... And Winds of Change. Right, these are cards that are played in top tier cEDH decks and have been for a long time, and there hasn't been a steady growth of these. It's not like all of a sudden these you look back for the past 2 years and Curse Totem has been creeping up ever so slightly. No, this card is just shot to the moon, and you usually only see that from buyouts.
I definitely agree with some of the other cards in this list. I was just making that note for specifically the deck emptying stuff. Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with stuff like we see with Curse Totem, Winds of Change. Steel Enchantment is a big one. Also,
Winds of Change has been like $15 for a long time. It wasn't $3 recently.
Hold on, let's pull up MTG stocks.
I
I've been selling Winds of Change well over $10 for.
We're talking about USD here. So I have it as $3 in July 2017.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
that's long
it
enough
holds $5 for up until April 2020.
Okay, well, I guess we just didn't see that in Canada. I don't know why.
But yeah, that's one where it's not really super. It's somewhat synergistic with some casual decks. Maybe like Nekusar.
So like we would have
whatnot,
seen the spike at Nekusar being printed or whatever. Like there's no huge synergy with it that was just printed to warrant it, right? Same thing with like Curse Totem. Curse Totem is a card that's a staple in cEDH for a long time and would have seen like increased pricing in regular EDH if people had like ever decided that it was an effect that they wanted. So the fact that it's a recent spike is definitely indicative of there being at least some attention on the format. I mean,
the one thing I think is kind of what's become obvious to, or at least this is my theory, what's become obvious to some of the MTG finance people out there who are trying to spec on cEDH is that cEDH are like the whales of EDH players. John, I'm sure you can speak to this a bit, where who out of all of the people who buy cards from you who play EDH for EDH purposes, who spends the most money on cards?
It's not the cEDH players.
Really?
Yeah, it's the people that want to flex on their friends.
So
I think it's a consequence of a relation where a lot of the strong cEDH decks have a lot of reserve list, and like if you want to paper out your cEDH deck, like you are kind of forced into it.
Like it's also
that was kind of what my theory was, Matt. Exactly, yeah.
Okay. The bottom end of cEDH players spends infinitely more than the bottom end of non, but the top end are the people that either want to flex on their friends, or they want to have multiple decks so that their friends don't have to buy a deck and they can play with this guy's decks. Or it's, which I get a lot of from the military college specifically, it's friends just coming in, buying like $50 worth of cards because their friend bought $50 worth of cards and they need to beat them, and then that guy comes back and spends 100, and then that guy comes back and spends 100, and then that guy comes, so it's just that. So Those are the three things that spend the most money. All three of those are people that spend more than the cEDH players, but then the cEDH players all come in next, and then the rest of the casual players come back after that.
I think a lot of it.
So they're just very consistently
a lot of it as well,
middle.
though, is like I don't think it's a direct consequence of cEDH players buying cards, and I don't think it's just too small of a section of the community for purchasing power to actually make sense there. What I really think it is it's like just cEDH as a concept receiving probably more attention in content than it's worth in population size, and that combined with the fact that a lot of cEDH players play cards that are good and have low attention just because you have to dig really deep to find synergy sometimes, and you end up like dredging up these hidden gems power level wise that eventually trickle down to the rest of the community and generate interest there.
My point was more that I think speculators are kind of realizing that if it's almost like a bet on cEDH itself, that it's growing in popularity and that the cEDH players are going to be buying these staples, whereas in a casual format with no real meta, right, they might just avoid their doubling season and go with something else or some other synergy piece, or just build a different deck. Whereas in cEDH, some of these cards like, Tainted Pact, Consultation, whatnot, that's kind of, half the meta at this point. So
yeah, one thing to say though about the Tainted package is it's been like relatively cheap probably for the past, and it's been strong for probably the past like 5 years.
So I would say it's been strong pre-Jace printing. I'd say it was like definitely a viable secondary win-con plan. But
but certainly on the radar of most cEDH players, and absolutely below the like $50 price point to just get to assemble the whole package.
Mm-hmm. Anything else anyone would like to add about cEDH? Like, I think pretty much cEDH is growing in popularity. I think that's a trend that we've all noticed as cEDH players. More people coming into the community. More posts on the subreddit. More engagement. Lots of viewership online. I think the big thing that has caused a recent spike in people joining the cEDH community is content creators like the Spike Feeders, Playing with Power, Casually Competitive, who are getting there's these gameplay videos out to tens of thousands of people. So
Yep.
generating an interest, and these people these new players want to build paper cEDH decks and causing spikes. so yeah.
Also, I think like the I hate to bring it up again, but the flash ban absolutely brought a lot of attention.
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
And like you can't say necessarily that these spikes are related to the flash ban, because they did start happening before that, but I think like the flash ban reassures that these spikes are going to be successful. In my mind, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, like, also, yeah, it could also just have been at the time when Flash was being considered for ban, or when people were pushing a lot for Flash ban, that there was a lot of the counter argument being like, oh, like, obviously Oracle's going to be really good after Flash gets banned, and there might have been people seeing that and just jumping on the train of, oh, well, if it's going to be really good and they're probably not going to ban it, might as well pick up the synergy pieces in case people want to buy into it after Flash is gone, right?
Yeah. I guess a closing thing to say on this before we move on would be, speculators are going to speculate on every format. It happens in Modern, happens in Standard. I mean, as John said, it's not really like the best thing to spec on Standard or especially Standard, but maybe not super wise to spec on Modern in the same way that you can spec on EDH. But this is the kind of thing that we have to deal with, and complaining about it and just shouting into the void doesn't really actually do anything. We kind of just have to live with it. And the increased card prices, but proxying is always an option. There's different meta decks that don't require a full fetch land and OG dual land mana base and tainted pact and all this BS. You can build budget versions of decks, and they're out there.
There's plenty of battle bond lands around to buy. People want them. They're all in a box, labeled mischief managed.
Nice.
Okay, then. Well, before we close the show, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, and that is Gut Check.
Good check. It's not the same with organism.
There's no contrast.
Yeah. Okay, well, so today's Gut Check question is very thematic, and that is, what are some cards to keep an eye on price-wise right now? So, you can list multiple or just one. I guess one is fine. But yeah, do you guys have some cards you're thinking might be prime targets for other just jumping up in price or not properly valued right now?
Yes, I do, in fact. But it has already been mentioned, and we certainly had a bit of a discussion, but I do have more to say on it. But that's Manifold. Every single deck that I've ever thought of putting a Manifold in, I've bought a new one, because I'm like, I hate to spec, but like, that card is not at all what it's gonna be, and as far as value,
yeah,
it just can't be.
And also,
like, it's just too similar to other cards that are just extremely.
And they can never reprint it, right? Is the issue.
And they can never
reprint it. They did just reprint
but like
it,
it's not something that like you see a large amount of reprints for, right? Like, it's just.
It's not going in a standard legal set.
The reprint is at such a small level too.
Yeah.
It's going in one of these limited print run sets, or it's at some crazy rarity.
Reed?
I mean, so obviously this just falls into the category of always buy RL. You can never have enough RL. But one of the ones that I've had my eye on forever at this point is Carnival of Souls, just because the card's effect is very unique. It's on RL. It's incredibly cheap right now for what it is. It has a lot of I can definitely see this just going into a bunch of casual aristocrats decks, all that good stuff. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that it doesn't have application in cEDH as well. So if you just want to pick it up for that reason, but I mean, like, I'm seeing $3 US right now. It's RL, super unique effect, very well costed. I don't know. Pick it up while you can.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that kind of just gets broken by the printing of
just like one thing, right? Like you just need like one thing to get
Yeah.
printed, and suddenly Carnivals of Souls is playable.
John, what about you?
Okay, I'm just going to make 2 quick points on those comments, and then I've got one coming out of left field here a bit. The Manifold thing is most important for people to think about, because if that card does hit the number we think it's going to, you're just going to feel so dirty. At least if a different card that's lower spikes a bit, it doesn't feel as bad. You're going to feel so bad if you don't get Manifold and it ends up in 3 digits. Second of all, I remember an old Inquest magazine where it said Carnival of Souls was the worst card ever printed. I just want to bring that up because it was real funny. The third thing is I'm going to go with a different card that involves a Double Master spoil already, and I'm going to say Primal Vigor.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Because Doubling Season is coming back, the other things that do similar things are going to bounce. Parallel Lives has already done that. Anointed Procession has already done that, and I think Primal Vigor is the shortest printing of them all. Of all of those types, I think Primal Vigor has the least, and I think that's the one that's going to do the most damage.
Yeah, well, looking over the past 20 days, it has been going up.
Well, I didn't know that, so
there you go.
But that's still like a good example.
Yeah, Procession and Parallel Lives can do some more, but I don't think they're doing more at a ratio that's going to offset what Doubling Season might do if it does a big drop on Double Masters. Primal Vigor is the one that could end up at the number that Doubling Season was at prior. If it sees as much, I know Doubling Season is the one that people want the most, so it should be higher, but supply and demand was also going to be skewed even more towards Primal Vigor being harder to find, so it might actually offset that it's not quite as good a card.
Yeah.
Okay, and for myself, I feel like you guys had some pretty solid, and this is less solid advice than I think your guys' answers. And mine is Recurring Insight, which is a card that I think has been cEDH players. It's fringe playable cEDH and mono blue decks. It is jokingly called the blue ad nauseum, and it just has such a strong effect in casual EDH and mid power and stuff, and I just think it's tremendously underplayed. So I think that's a card that it also only has one printing in an older-ish standard set.
Certainly old enough.
Yeah, old enough. So that's one I think that if more casual players catch on to the strength of that card, and it becomes a staple of the tier of Consecrated Sphinx or it's not a Consecrated Sphinx or Psych Rift, but if it gets the same amount of I'm playing a blue deck, I should include Consecrated Sphinx, I should include Recurring Insight because it's so good, then it's probably gonna increase in price.
Staple level.
Yeah, it's that good, and I just think people are sleeping on it right now. So yeah, that's my pick.
It does kind of fall between the too good for high power, not good enough for cEDH. I think that for me is a weird spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It stays off my radar for that reason. That being said, it is definitely a strong card.
Another reason that it could definitely go up is because it stays off everyone's radar, because it's just not in decks right now that would want that effect. People just don't know it exists. There's a card that I was on a long time ago, Dragon Arch. It was $1 because people didn't know the card existed, and at one point it hit $15 because I started showing people that card and people were buying it, and I guess it caught on somewhere else, and that card was up for a while. It's back down now, but Recurring Insight could be a card very similar to that.
I think Recurring Insight is one amazing Command Zone or Game Nights appearance from just going gangbusters.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah,
and that seems like a card that they would put in that someone would put in their deck. So buy your copies of Recurring Insight now. Well, they're only $2. Okay, well, that wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a Patreon, we are at patreon.com/IntoNorthPodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, to our long-suffering podcast editor Roadkill, and to John for being a guest on this episode. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then,
peace.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.